Okay, remember yesterday how there was no voice acting on the final cutscene? Yeah, today I replayed it and there was, so here's how the Emperor sounds.
Thou, I have a particular idea as to the question of your service in mine. From this day forth, thou art named the Eternal Champion. From thy hand shall be dealt the needs of the Empire. I, Uriel Septim, true Emperor of Tamriel, do decree and thus make law. Arise, my champion, and take thy rightful place at my side.
So today is the last part of the Arena series. Hopefully you've been watching and enjoying as it's gone along. In the last part we actually beat the game and in theory could have ended there, but I did have some unfinished stuff that I wanted to talk to you guys about. As I was preparing this series, I found a lot of really amazing and interesting trivia that I wanted to layer through as we were going for it, but some just kind of didn't work, and by about halfway through the series I realized it'd probably be better to do something of an information dump toward the end. So for those of you really interested in those extra details that most people who play the game or watch the game would never find out, this video will be for you. And in particular, something unfinished from the very beginning. Remember we opened all of this with a short story? It's a good-sized piece of official canon lore that can only be found in the manual and probably would have served as the game's opening cutscene if they had time to make it. Well, I'm going to finish that short story for you now, then we'll move into some other stuff. And in finishing the short story, you'll actually realize why the floppy disk version of the game had an alternate ending. So let's start off with that. Tarlin awoke in the darkened cell, his head pounding from the blow it had received. A single candle guttered and flamed in one corner. Occasionally, the clink of chains could be heard as they swung in a slight, fetid breeze. He knew where he was now. It came back to him even as he struggled to his feet. Fighting off the nausea, he made his way to a crude stone bench. I have been taken by the Empire, but for what? His thoughts were interrupted by a low moan that came drifting down the corridor outside his cell door. Suddenly, he was glad for the obvious strength of his cell door. I have been left to die, he thought incredulously. They did not even bother to strip me of my possessions. Indeed, upon self-examination, Tarlin found that he still carried his dagger and a pouch of his money. It seemed that the Emperor had no fears of his escape, and why should he? He did a quick circumspection of the room, finding that except for the slime-covered walls and floor, no water or food had been left. A slow death indeed. Suddenly the air near the centre of the cell seemed to brighten, slowly coalescing into a globe of brilliance. Tarlin fell back, shielding his eyes from the glare. The light receded, and in the purple after-images of that burst, he could see the shimmering form of a woman floating, her body draped in gossamer and blown by an unseen wind. Do not fear, Tarlin, for it is I, Rhea Sylmaine. Tarlin looked on in shock as the figure of his friend took on form and substance, though somehow it did not seem to lose its edge of etherealness. Rhea, what in the name of the lady has happened? Rhea's face seemed etched in grief, drawn by a sadness he could not comprehend. Tarlin, do you remember the last time we saw each other? It was at mid-year's festival. I fear that is where the evil took form. What happened to you? Tarlin asked in a shocked whisper. He had known Rhea since he had been summoned to court to learn under her tutelage the ways of sorcery. Rhea had been the senior apprentice to Jaegar Tharn, the imperial battle mage of Tamriel. I am dead, Tarlin. Only my powers keep me in this form, though the pull of the afterlife is strong. I can resist, but only for a time. It is imperative that someone know the truth, that someone stop the evil which has struck from the heart of the imperial seat. Tarlin sat down once more, his legs seeming to no longer obey. Left to die in a cell, my friend already dead? What has happened to us all? The Emperor is not who he seems to be, Tarlin. He is in fact Jaegar Tharn. The true Emperor was captured by Tharn and shifted to another dimension, a prison in which time runs much slower than on this plane of existence. Tarlin looked up, his face a mask of shock and outrage. But what of the Amulet of Kings? The Emperor is not dead. Only in the event of his demise would the amulet warn the Elder Council. Tharn was meticulous in his planning. With time in the dimension in which the Emperor has been imprisoned running at a fraction of what it does here, it will be centuries before the true Emperor dies. And when he does, who will care? Those people will have seen the glorious rule of Uriel Septim VII end generations in their past. Tharn must be stopped, here and now. Rhea's face had a resolute set, one that if Talon had noticed, would have sent shivers of foreboding through his body. Talon looked around. Why are you here? I am but one and not skilled in much of anything. Why not go to General Warhaft or the Imperial Guard? Rhea shook her head. They have been captured along with the Emperor, and Tharn has transmorphed others to take their places, those who are loyal to him only. I cannot trust anyone else with this, Talon. As you said, Tharn will not search for you as he would someone he considered a threat. Most of them are dead already. You can see the disdain the wizard has for you, not bothering to even bind you in this cell. He does not see you as a threat, and in that arrogance, he has made his first mistake. For the first time, the ghost of Rhea Silmain smiled, and to Talon, it was as if the sun had come from behind a cloud. I wish to escape, that is sure. Beyond that, I know not what I can do, Rhea. Take this. At Rhea's gesture, a ruby key flashed into being in a niche in the northern wall of the cell. It will unlock the cell door. You are in the sewers of the Imperial City. If you make your way west, then south, I can effect your escape. Talon thought a moment. It will not do to have me surface in the city itself, for I would be quickly captured. I think it an uncommon occurrence to see a man pull himself through a grating on a city street. The guards, at least, will have questions, ones I will be unable to satisfactorily answer. Rhea smiled again. I am not as helpless as you may suppose. Even in this form, I am able to work my magic, but to do so depletes the energy I use to remain on this plane. Your escape, however, is paramount to all other considerations. Get to the southwest corner of this sewer. There you will see a shift gate. It will transport you to another city, where you will appear inside their city gates. Teleportation between cities is common enough. I doubt you will come under scrutiny. With that, you will be far enough from the center of the Empire to begin. Talon felt a faint fear gnaw in the pit of his stomach, and he whispered, Begin what? Your training, of course. There was an uncomfortable silence as Talon looked at his friend. He did not entirely trust his ability to help her, to really make a difference. The alternative, however, was to allow the man who had killed his friend to continue the charade. Talon was not one to let a lie go unanswered. Rhea concerned him, however. Even now he could see the fringes of her form dissipating, and her face took on a worn and lined expression, as if she were tiring. He did not relish the idea of being alone in this, not knowing who he could trust. Will I see you again? If you survive these sewers and escape, I will come to you again. There is much I need to investigate first so that we may find a way to free the Emperor from the dimension in which Tharn has placed him. Only by his release will the truth come to light. Remember, Talon, Tharn has taken on the form of the Emperor, and no one will gainsay his word for yours. Had I been able, I would have appeared to the Elder Council, but my body lies close by, forgotten and decayed. In this form, I cannot travel far away from my mortal remains. Rhea looked down, her once wheaten tresses hanging limply as the ethereal wind diminished. I cannot come to you again as I have now. It takes energy I dare not squander. She reached out and touched Talon on the forehead. He felt a slight tingling, like an itch behind his eyes. A moment later, it was gone. I have linked us, so that I can appear to you regardless of the distance, but I will only appear to you henceforth in your dreams. The way is safer and less costly. It is very important that you rest now and again when you are safe. It will only be during those times that I can reach you. Rhea looked into Talon's eyes. You are entering a dangerous arena, my friend. One in which the players are beings beyond your mortal comprehension. I see in your destiny the ability to transcend. There is a power within you as yet untapped. Look for me when you have gained some experience in the world. You are my last and best hope, Talon. Before Talon could respond, the form of Rhea faded from view. In the deepening gloom, Talon could feel the icy fingers of fear creeping slowly back into his flesh. Then the glint of ruby caught his eye. He walked over to the niche and picked up the key. It felt warm to the touch and strangely comforting. He thought about his friend Rhea, dead now, though she clung to the unlife for the sake of justice. He thought about Jagar Tharn, who had killed his friend and attempted his own life. Such evil could not be permitted to grow, or go unchecked. Looking about the cell, his purpose became clearer, as if his ruminations had opened a door to the beginnings of understanding. Perhaps Rhea had ensorcelled the key to produce this reaction, he knew not, but a litany from his old arms master came to mind, and he whispered, "Given the outcome of certain death, die with a blade in hand." The cell door was a massive construction of iron and steel. He paused only a moment to listen. The moaning was gone, but from the darkness he could hear dozens of tiny claws skittering and scratching the damp mossy brownstone. Occasionally red eyes gleamed out at him. Tarlin inserted the key to the lock and turned it. With a groan, the mechanism released, and the cell doors swung open on rusty hinges. Despite the noise, nothing flew out from the darkness to attack. It was as if the sewer itself had decided he was no threat, and turned its back on him. "Tharn," he thought, "you will not escape me so easily." Grabbing the candle from its holder, Tarlin drew both breath and dagger as he ventured into the darkened hall. Alright, so there you go. So that's the short story. I really wanted to read that whole thing right at the start, but I figured it might turn people off somewhat to have what is really quite a long story. I appreciate doing it here at the end. A lot of it feels redundant, you know, because they do give you a very distilled version of it in-game, and they really expanded on it here. But I think it's well worth going over. It introduces some stuff to this franchise that the game itself won't play with. It will only be the later games that play with. Like, for example, I find it really interesting that at the start, it's already talking about the amulet that the Emperor is wearing. And that if the Emperor died, the amulet would have somehow warned the Elder Council and people would have known to find a new one. That's all really interesting setup, and it kind of explains why Jagar had to imprison the Emperor. I guess maybe they constructed that story just for that purpose. But the later games will look at that in kind of a cool way. And you have to read this manual short story really to get that side of it. The story's not perfect. In a game like this, and this is a recurring thing as the franchise goes along, they really shouldn't be setting up your backstory. That's for you to roleplay and decide for yourself. Yet here they've kind of said that you're a male, you know, your name is Tarlin. It sounds like you've even studied a bit of sorcery in the past, and maybe you don't actually want to do a character like that. But all of that I find quite easy to handwave. The most interesting thing really here, as far as the end of the game is concerned, is early in the short story, you remember they do mention some other characters that got captured with the Emperor, particularly a guy with the name General Warhaft. He was supposedly thrown into this dimension with the Emperor. And so when we beat the game though, and we opened the portal, only the Emperor came out, right? And that was it. Well, that's not true on the floppy disk version. On floppy disk, both characters come out, and I guess that was really confusing for people who didn't read the manual. So when it came to the CD re-release, they just had the Emperor alone. That's my guess as to why they made the change. I'm not quite sure at what point in time game developers really stopped caring about manuals and stopped assuming people were reading them. Back in the day, with long installation times and stuff, I would always be reading the manual, and I'm sure the proportion of people that did it was very high. But of course, as we saw over like the PS2 era, you stop getting manuals and extra things in a lot of game cases. You have to sort of go to collector's editions for a lot of that stuff now, and it kind of withered away. I don't know when game design started getting affected by that, but I'm guessing, yeah, it's because they didn't think people would have read the story, and it would have been confusing to have two people come out at the end. Continuing on, the manual does talk about some other facets of the game that we really didn't get to experience on our particular character and the way that we went through it. So I wanted to show those to you guys. There's some interesting story and setting building here. Not all of it is taken forwards, but I think is definitely worth going over. First of all, this section in the manual called The Cities of Arena, where it goes into a lot of detail about everything you can do in cities, like all the options that are available in a tavern. I obviously showed you guys that already, or what the palaces are for, which I've obviously shown you already. Interestingly, by the way, in palaces at nighttime in the game's code, you're supposed to be able to collect huge amounts of money, like 10,000, 20,000 gold, but there's no way to get into palaces at nighttime, so it's all like wasted code. It's apparently a feature they were trying to put in the game that never worked in the end. But so this section just goes over everything you can do in cities, which I've done except one big feature. So let's just read through. First, they talk a bit about the days and dates. They talk about the eras. They go the days of the week, which I'm still, as you guys know, getting to grips with and learning it. So Maundus, Turdus, Midus, Turdus, Fredus, Laudus, Sundus. I mean, they're close enough to the English idea of the days of the week, but, you know, it will take me a little bit more, I think, before it's really in my head. Then you've got the months: Morning Star, Sun's Dawn, First Seed, Rain's Hand, Second Seed, Mid-Year, Sun's Height, Last Seed, Hearthfire, Frostfall, Sun's Dusk, Evening Star. I would really like to know this super well, because for all of the games, you're going to be reading these a lot, and I would really, really like to have it as second nature in me. To read Frostfall and immediately know, oh, okay, we're talking about October, right, or whatever. And they've got them split here. But here's the section I really want to go into. Holidays. Interspersed throughout the year are certain holidays which are celebrated by the people of the known world. It's on these days that you'll be able to find special bargains on many different services. On some holidays, such as the Warriors Festival, all weapons are half price. On others, such as Tails and Tallows, you can find special prices at the Mages Guilds. The following is a complete list of the holidays celebrated. Smart planning can ensure your arrival at a particular town in time to take advantage of the festivities. So, you might have been wondering why the game has, like, the whole travel mechanic where it's like, it will take X days to arrive at Y place. Really, I think the only reason that exists is if you really care about the holidays and you're looking for discounts. We've obviously seen as we've played through the game that there are certain money-making methods that mean you should never care about a discount at all, really. Or at least you don't ever really care about discounts until you get up to like ebony gear and some of the last stuff and high-powered enchanted gear. At that point, if you're trying to make a purchase like that, yes, you probably do care about the holidays. And remember, this is a game where there's no gating behind any gear. You could, in theory, start, get just a little bit of money, go to the perfect town or the perfect holiday and buy some high-level ebony thing right at the beginning of your adventure. There's nothing stopping you doing that. So maybe there's something of that there, but you'd have to have a really incredible knowledge of when all the holidays trigger, what towns are selling what, or constantly be referring back to this manual as you play, which, you know, in an era where they're asking you to print out journal entries and draw your own maps and stuff, I can totally imagine people doing, but for nowadays contemporary gameplay, it's not much of a thing. In fact, you saw as I played through, I think we only saw one holiday, maybe two. I think off screen I saw a couple while I was doing my gear gathering, but I was never playing into it. Anyway, here are the holidays. And I don't know about Daggerfall, but I don't really recognize these from the later games. Maybe Bethesda will do something at some point. But you've got the New Life Festival, which is the first day of Morning Star. Now, if I was really smart, what I could do is refer the months to the real-world months, and we could see what they're supposed to be analogs of IRL. But then there's the Southwind's Prayer, Heart's Day, First Planting, Jester's Day, Second Planting, Mid-Year Celebration, Merchant's Festival, Sun's Rest, Harvest End, Tails and Tallows, Witches Festival, Emperor's Day, Warriors Festival, and the Northwind's Prayer. So, I don't know, I just felt somewhat like I wanted to get that information out for you guys. And finally, the last big treasure trove of information in the manual refers to a whole side of the game we didn't experience much, and that is magic and spellcasting. So, I did want to show you guys how they tier the spells together. The manual describes a little bit what magic is. We get that picture. It talks about how to create spells and how you can combine them. But then it basically goes over the spells that you can purchase in the game and how they are banded together in what they called circinates. By the way, there's a chance I'm pronouncing that wrong. So let's go through them. So like basically the tier 1 spells, as you can see here, are Levitate, which we know we used a lot in the game. Stamina, which will give you fatigue back, and didn't really matter, as you saw, fatigue wasn't a really well realized mechanic in this game. Light, which we saw. Heal, which we saw. Then there was a spell in the first tier called Orc Strength, which would give you an extra 15 points of strength. If we had been playing a character that could cast spells, but we still wanted to be like a melee physical guy, Orc Strength might have been something we were using a lot. Invisibility was a tier 1 spell. Wonderlight, that was that projectile I used at one point. It says fires a globe of light in whatever direction the caster wishes, illuminating all around while it travels. Now, the idea that you're using that spell to actually light stuff up doesn't sound very useful to me. It'd be much better to just use a regular spell, but there it is. And then the final one in tier 1 is called Wizard's Fire, which we saw a few times. It's basically just a little bit of damage. For the T2 spells, you had Shock, which is kind of just a bit of a stronger Wizard's Fire. Strength Leech. Now, this one's actually pretty nice. It will take strength from them and give it to you. Now, I can imagine against liches and vampires and stuff, you could fortify your strength and then use this to go even higher and also diminish their ability to, like, one-shot you, which is quite nice. Shield, which just creates a shield around you, absorbs damage. That one's actually really strong, and you'll see people taking advantage of if they're trying to speedrun the game and go out of their depth in terms of level. They're basically relying on shield to keep them alive rather than their own health. Free action, we of course drank lots of potions of free action. It's interesting to me that free action is a T2 spell when you're immediately finding spiders that can paralyze you. You know, I think the only place where you're not at risk of being paralyzed is the opening sewers, right? So the idea that you got to get all the way up there. But anyway, then we get T3. There's opening locks, resist cold, fire, and shock. They were all T3. And I think that's fair because they're all quite strong. Sanctuary has a 50% chance plus another 2% every level you get to be ignored by attacking people or monsters. So it sounds a bit like invisibility. I want to really draw your attention to the phrasing here, though, that the caster has a chance of being ignored by attacking people or monsters. Remember that because I'm going to give you some trivia about the development of this game in a moment that's not from the manual, about a whole other side to Arena where I think this spell would have been really interesting, but when they removed that side, the spell just feels kind of weird now. Wizard Lock is a weird one. It lets you lock something. So you could close a door. Let's say I'm being chased, and the idea is I'm running through trying to skip enemies. I can close a door and lock it, and they won't be able to follow me necessarily until they, like, break their way through. Because we can see that enemies do open and close doors. That's a fun interaction that we obviously never experienced. Fireball needs no explanation. Cure Poison needs no explanation. Ice Bolt. Cure Disease. No explanation needed. T4. There's Earth Wall. Caster can cause up to 4 walls to rise from the ground, useful for blocking passages or trapping foes. Again, something we really didn't play with. Now, those are permanent walls, and you can see now as a mage, maybe you want to play like a Geomancer mage that manipulates the terrain a lot and then uses Pass Wall in a more authentic way to break open the things you've created. It's weird to think that you could create Earth Wall and not have any way of getting rid of them, so you just get yourself stuck. Arena was no stranger to letting you get stuck, and well, there you have it. Spell Shield, another version of Shield, but for spells, very useful, especially late game, as you've seen. Maybe you're not stacking willpower, maybe you want to use that instead. Heal True is the 4th, so a nice strong heal. Silence, caster can silence another single creature, preventing it from casting spells. I guess that would be good if you want to maintain range, but you're also not good against their magical projectiles. Troll's Blood is a really strong heal. It's actually stronger than Heal True, and it's consistent as well. It will always heal you for 60 instead of, you know, a range of 25 to 50. But it's regeneration, so you only get 1 per round, which means it's going to take a long time. So I don't know how strong I really feel that is. Reminds me a lot of how GW1 did Troll Unguent. Maybe this is all hooking into D&D or Ultima or something. By the way, that's another thing. A few of you guys did mention in the comments, it's not just D&D in general, but actually Bethesda have gone on the record and said that it was Ultima that was a big inspiration for them too. And so we obviously need not forget that Ultima dominated the landscape for a long time around now. Witch's Curse. You can slow down their intelligence, willpower, personality, and luck, which is a lot of stats. Affecting their luck really isn't going to do very much, but there you have it. Ice Storm and Firestorm, I think we actually cast one of those on a mark at one point in one of the videos. T5, and there are 8 tiers for what it's worth, so we're just over half. Wyvern Sting. The caster fires a magical dart which can poison someone. I wonder if that is what Jagar Tharn used to us at the end of the game. That sounds like, you know, he'd probably be doing high tier spells and he could have thrown a Wyvern Sting at us. But, you know, some idea of wyverns being out there in Tamriel, even though we never got to fight any. Resist poison. It seems like they valued poison as this really high-level thing, but I don't really think the gameplay reflected that. T6 gives us Pass Wall Pitfalls. Force Wall is just a really strong shield, alright, so for physical damage, but really strong. Again, people really rely on that. Wildfire, now that's basically a damage over time burning spell, pretty cool. Spell Drain. With this, you can basically take their MP. They're called spell points here, not magic points, but you can steal that from them. Far Silence. The caster can silence a single creature at range. So I guess the previous silence spell really isn't that good, because if you've closed the gap to silence someone in melee, then they're probably not casting spells on you anymore. Lifesteal. You can transfer 40 points of health from a target to you. Again, I think Lifesteal's really good in Arena. So the 7th Circuit has Toxic Cloud. The caster and we definitely never saw this. The caster causes a gaseous ball of toxic gas to speed outward to selected target. And it does damage, and it hits your health and fatigue. Maybe that's what Jaeger was doing, I don't know. I was expecting it to look like a cloud, but it sounds like just another projectile. Wizard Rend, we found some items enchanted with this, but never used it. This spell is the bane of wizards everywhere. When cast, the next creature struck, or touched, has a 5% chance, plus an additional 5% for every level, to be both silenced and paralyzed at once. In addition, it does damage. So yeah, lots of stuff. Shalador's Mirror. Now, I talked a lot about Shalador when we were in the labyrinth, right? With the reflected layout and so on. By turning the very air surrounding the caster into a reflective shield, the caster has the ability to reflect spells back at the opposing caster. And didn't we actually use a Shalador's Mirror enchantment at least once as we were playing? Lightning. The caster can fire a bolt of electrical energy at a creature. They'll be struck to take loads of damage to their health and fatigue, and even more for every level we get. So then that leaves us with just the final tier, which is known as the Arc Circuit. I really hope I've been pronouncing that correctly. Medusa's Gaze. The caster has the ability to paralyze a single creature. So that's like top tier to just be able to paralyze someone. And it's weird because for us, we get paralyzed all the time and we just free action out. Cause Disease. The caster has a 25% chance to disease a target. I mean, is that really worth the very top level? Force Bolt. By concentrating the magical aura that surrounds all beings, the caster can cause a magical implosion around a single creature at range. The targeted creature suffers damage and then extra damage for all of our levels, and they have a 10% chance to be paralyzed. So damage and paralyze on Force Bolt. Their description there is very Star Warsy. And did you notice the vision we get from Rhea is kind of Star Warsy as well? Purify. Upon casting the spell, the caster is healed for 100 points, cured of any poison, and enveloped in a sanctuary that will cause all other creatures to ignore him or her, but from which caster can still cast offensive spells. So now that one is nuts. Purify is crazy. It costs 2,590 spell points, but it's like the ultimate defensive spell. Very badass, and it's only trumped by the final spell, so to speak, in the game, called God's Fire, a whopping 3,700 spell points. It's massive. God's Fire. The caster unleashes a bolt of fire that envelops a single target, doing 100 fire damage plus another 100 damage for every level of the caster. Needless to say, for a high-level caster, this spell will vaporize almost any single foe. Now, that's the one thing I really regret not being able to show you guys, but if you think about it, I was level 18 at the end. If I had cast God's Fire on something, I would have done an unbelievable amount of damage. Almost 3,000 damage, just like that. Would have been pretty cool. I don't think you find anything enchanted with God's Fire. Maybe you do, and you guys can point that out in the comments if so. But there you go. So that's the magic. I wanted to talk about it, at least if we didn't show it off because of our particular kind of character. And there you have it. I'm going to leave the manual there. If you guys are super interested, there are some other nice little things. I especially enjoy their Q&A at the bottom, where they, someone's asking, can I play the game along with Norton's Speed Disc? And they talk about Norton's Speed Disc as if is it okay or not? Just real signs of the times that you guys might find interesting as I do, but I won't bog you down with. So the last thing I want to do with this info dump before we close out the video and the series altogether is link you guys. You'll find a link in the description to a really cool website, Cult Cover Discs, that did some pieces about Arena, and in particular they talked about some elements of the game during development that are really, really revealing. So here, check this out. I won't just read all of it verbatim. You guys can go to the website if you want. I wouldn't want to feel like I'm just stealing their stuff. But for example, they open up by talking about the cover art of the game and how it changed throughout development, and how, sex was selling at the time and what they felt about having this very busty lady on the front screen and so on. Some choice, really amazing bits of information though. On this page, they do show off some enemies that never appeared in the game. So for example, here is an illustration of Lord Bell, or another demon from Dungeons & Dragons, doesn't appear in the game. They also had this screenshot before the game came out of a beholder, which is mentioned still in more than half of the files of the retail version, but you don't fight any beholders. Remember what I said in some of these later videos about how it would be cool if there were some more enemy variety at the end? Well, this is maybe what it was, and the Lich looked very different as well. This is what a Lich looked like before the game came out. Next on the best of the best from this website, in my opinion, is this amazing page. Now, it's called the Elder Scrolls Arena, right? And they kind of loosely justify that with some of the text as you boot the game. But here's what they say. When reading through old cities' descriptions of Arena, they were describing every city having a gladiator team waiting for you to challenge them. The principle was going to be in Oblivion as well, which had Arena in every city too, but the idea was discarded during the development of the game. A French article. Apparently, Bethesda loved the French and did loads of interviews and articles with French magazines that got a lot of information. Tells us more about the story. Gladiator teams were going to fight against each other, and the winner would get the throne that would be threatened by, for some reason, by demonic forces. From the beginning, there were always dungeons for the player to explore to strengthen his characters before fighting other teams. Because fighting alone is boring, the player should be supported by a team of other characters. In the EXE of Arena, you can find strings like Team Leader or Team Member 2. So they explained this here in 1994. We wanted to create a real arena where players can fight against NPCs and win golden prizes. For example, we wanted to include the option of playing via network and having a party with bargaining, hiring, firing, and so on. Of course, we couldn't integrate all of this. So they had crazy plans for a very different kind of game where, yeah, you were traveling to all these cities to fight in their arena. And if you think about the world map and how many useless cities there essentially are, if we don't count the shops, the idea that you travel to all of them and fight in the arenas, well, that makes a lot of sense. But not only that, the justification for the title and where that may have come from, but the idea that this was actually going to be a party-based game, like, no joke. And if you look at some of these early screenshots, you can see there were 4 party members in Arena. And so when we think about that spell a second ago, where the caster has less chance to be targeted, well, that makes sense in the context of one of these first-person, multiple-character RPGs, where you're like, okay, this guy's supposed to be on my backline, I don't want them to shoot this character, so I'll use this spell of Sanctuary, and he won't be targeted, but my frontline heavy armor dudes will be. So yes, it was going to be a team-based game where you're actually fighting in arenas. And they have so much cool concept art and things that just basically never ended up making it into the game at all that I really, really, really think you guys should check out. So link in the description for that. But those were the big ones. I wanted to talk about them at some point throughout the series and just never really had an opportunity in the end. And there you have it. So thank you guys. I really hope you've enjoyed watching my run through of Arena here. I recommend, if you're still looking for more Arena stuff, to watch a speed run of the game. Check out AGDQ or any kind of runs. There's still a community of people dealing with it. It's really fascinating to see all the ways in which people break the game. You can watch glitch categories. You can watch glitch lists. They'll give you very different experience and sequence breaks. And, you know, it's been however many hours to watch me go through this game and talk to you about it at a normal pace. You should see how fast people can deal it with other ones. It will be thoroughly entertaining. And until next time, I will be back very soon. We will be looking at Daggerfall. There might be a couple of interim videos. We'll see. And until then, I hope you guys enjoy. Don't forget to go to my channel page and check out the playlist section to navigate through the rest of my Elder Scrolls content. Onward and upward, we're moving on to the second game. I'll see you guys there. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for watching. And especially to those who watch this coming out live, thank you for your patience in those 2.5 to 3 months where there weren't any uploads in the middle. I really appreciate it, guys. And I'll see you next time.